G'day everyone. Today I'm going to do a gear list for my trip in New Zealand that we've just recently done. So I've been getting a heap of messages, emails and comments asking for a gear list, mainly from people that haven't been before. It was my first time going, same with Alana's. So basically all I did while I was there, created a memo on my phone and just wrote a wish I had list and glad I had list. So hopefully that'll give you guys an idea of what I'm glad I took, what I wish I had, and yeah, on my wish list I'll be definitely adding that to the gear arsenal because there was quite a few things there I definitely wish I had. So just to start off, I'm going to run through the wish I had list. At the top of that was a spotting scope. Zach, he had a spotting scope there, the Swaro 20-60, and that thing was a game changer. So we were still spotting tar from camp in our standard binos, but to evaluate the tar is very difficult without a spotting scope. So next time I go, I think I'll be definitely purchasing a spotting scope before I head over. Second thing was a glassing pad. So like one of those Thermarest, those fold up seats that you basically just sit down, you can glass on. Wish I had one of them. Wasn't a must. I don't think it would bother me if I didn't have one. I obviously survived alright, but I've got a fractured tailbone and there was quite a few times where you're sitting and glassing for a long period of time, and I wish I had something to sit on, something a bit nicer than the rocks that we had. So that was on my wish list. Second, puffy jacket. I had nearly lived in my puffy jacket there, and I wish I had a second one as a basically get back to the 10 option and also as a pillow option. The good thing about a puffy is they're quite versatile. You can sort of use one as a pillow or you can wear it and stay warm. So I wish I had a second one of them. Fourth thing on the list, better gaiters. I actually didn't bring them out for the gear list video, but you'll get the idea anyway. So the current gaiters I have, they were pretty average to say the least. I just bought them off a mate. Never really worn gaiters in my life. On the last day, I actually borrowed Alana's Cedar Summit ones, and they were a huge step above the ones I was using. So I jotted that down straight away. Better gaiters, mainly to protect your boots and your laces, and they help prevent a lot of water coming in during the river crossings, which were quite prevalent. We had a river right near the camp, so we were walking through that basically every day. So better gaiters is definitely on my list. A warmer rangefinder. Now, if you've watched my previous video or on the trip, you would have heard my rambling about the rangefinder being cold and not working. And I wasn't the only one that had that issue. So basically, yeah, I wish I'd kept my rangefinder in a warm spot. So if you're heading over to New Zealand, it's going to be cold. Definitely keep that in mind. Keep your rangefinder somewhere where it's going to be warm. They're a critical sort of tool when it comes to the longer range work. If you need to make a shot, say 300, 400, 500 yards, you really need to know how far you're shooting. And what I found there was the distances were a lot further than what I thought they were. So the rangefinder was critical, and it didn't work at some important times. So I wish I'd kept it somewhere warmer. What else have I got on my list? Gatorade Powerade powder. Now luckily John thought ahead and he had a big tub of Gatorade, the powder stuff that you mix into water, and that was pretty popular. I think his whole tub was gone by the end of the 8 days. Basically at the end of a big day we came back and we were craving something a bit more than water, so that was something that worked really well. We woke up without cramps, whether that had anything to do with it, but it was definitely refreshing having something a little bit different to water to come back to after a big day. More guide ropes for the tent. Luckily, same thing, John saved the day. He had some extra guide ropes. We had some reasonably strong winds there, and some more guide ropes for the tent would have been ideal to have to start with. And also setting the tent up properly for expecting the worst. So setting it up straight away, expecting a hurricane. And if you don't get it, you don't get it, but at least the tent's set up. We were sort of set up probably a little bit too, what's the word for it? I'm gonna have to cut this. I've lost the word. we were set up probably a little bit too skimpily at the start. That's probably not even a word, but I'm going to use it because we didn't expect to have the huge strong winds, and we ended up having them, and yeah, we had some issues there. So more guide ropes. Take more guide ropes than you need. Aluminium tent poles. We had an issue with the carbon tent poles on the tent that we were running. Luckily, the company was awesome. They've already basically said that they'll replace them, everything free of charge, and sort that out for us. So that's been good. But going forward, yeah, I've actually asked for the replacement to be aluminium poles because we had issues with the carbon. So probably, once in a million sort of failure happening there, but again, the aluminium seemed to be a safer bet. 100 mile per hour tape, so it's like gaffer tape for tent repairs. I wish I had some, but luckily Zach had some, so that was all good. We managed to repair our tent that was broken, all the poles, and we also patched up some holes that had happened because of the broken poles, so some holes in the fly, so fixed that with the tape. Wish I had some of that, and I'll definitely be taking some next time. More chocolate. That's probably, we thought we had bought enough when we were in the supermarket before we headed off, but it's amazing how much chocolate lifts your spirits after a big day on the mountain. So we'll be taking more chocolate. Again, luckily John saved the day. He had enough chocolate to feed an army, so we smashed his chocolate a fair bit. Another thing I wish I brought was a phone gimbal. I've actually got one. It's a Xi'an Smooth Q, just a cheap small gimbal. And I was thinking about taking it, and I was worried about weight limits, and in the end I could have taken it pretty comfortably, but I wish I did have it because after I lost my tripod legs, I did a lot more on my phone, and having that gimbal would have been cool. I could have, got some better footage and actually sort of put a bit more effort into the filming side of it. But again, at the end of the day, not something I needed, but something I still kind of wish I'd taken there. That's basically it for the wish I had list from what I can recall and from what I wrote down on the trip. That's all I had. Now, onto the glad I had list. At the very top, it's trekking poles. We were all using trekking poles except John, and I think he was wishing he had trekking poles. So I'm just using some Halinox Ridgelines. The aluminium poles are actually given to me by Alana's old man, and they copped a hiding. Some of the scree that I was running down using these to stabilize was pretty hectic, and they handled it just fine. So highly recommend trekking poles. Alana was using some Black Diamond aluminium ones, and Zach was using some Lecky carbon fibers. Doesn't really matter what you use, but they're definitely better than not having them. Second on the list, good boots. So I was using the Lauer Irox, and for the weight, these things were just brilliant. The only issue I had was some wear sort of on the side of the boot here, and that was from all the scree surfing and rock climbing and the sort of stuff that we don't really do that much in Australia. But I mean, these things were awesome. My feet were dry, comfortable, didn't get any blisters, and folding up from that third on my list is Super Feet. So I'll show you guys in the boot here. That's an aftermarket inner sole. It's called Super Feet Orange, and they were at the top of my list because originally when I started wearing those boots, the inner sole was really firm. I put those inner soles in and they were just felt like a new boot. They've been brilliant. They've been my best boot I've ever owned, and a lot of that's thanks to the Super Feet that I put in there. So Super Feet Orange. If you want new inner soles, check them out. They're awesome. Good pack. Next on the list, got the Old Faithful XO 5500. I'm always raving about that pack because it's been by far the best pack I've ever owned, and it's quite amazing. You hunt with a few different people and they're using different packs, and when you start going through the features of the meat shelf and everything, even when I cape my bull out and being able to strap the cape and the head in the meat shelf, having it nice and close to your body, when you're walking around cliffs, things like features like that start to become quite a safety feature. And It never once made me feel unsafe having that pack on, whereas other brands and models, I probably wouldn't have felt very good walking and climbing in some of the spots I did. So good pack was very high on the list for that reason. A good tent. So we're running the Kuiu Mountain Star, and as I said before, we had an issue with the carbon poles, so that was just a pole issue. It wasn't a tent issue, and going to get them swapped for aluminium poles. As I said, the carbon poles are probably fine. We just had an issue with our ones, so they get replaced. But other than that, the tent was awesome. We slept really well. We stayed warm, blocked the wind, 2 vestibules, quite a spacious tent. No real complaints there. Good sleeping bag and sleeping pad. All of us were using Thermarest. I was using the X-Lite, Alana was using the ProLite Plus, and John and Zach were using the X-Therm. And no issues, no one needed to top the air mattresses up with air or anything. We were sleeping on rocks for the whole duration. That was where our camp was, and no issues with the Thermarest mats. So sleeping bag, I was using a Van Gogh Venom. I think it's a 200. Don't quote me on that. It might be a 400 or something. I'm not sure. It's hanging up in the cupboard and I didn't want to rip it out. It kept me quite warm. Wasn't brilliant. Alana was using the North Face Cat's Meow. I think she was a lot warmer than what I was, but it's a better cold rated bag, and it's a synthetic one. So if you hopped in it wet, you weren't wrecking the down in it. Could be an option I look at. Would be getting a Cat's Meow. So something to think about. But all in all, the Van Gogh works pretty well. Following up from that, we've got the Thermolite Fabric Reactor. So it's a Cedar Summit sleeping bag liner. That was great. That helped my sleeping bag a lot. I think it would have been very cold without that sleeping bag liner. So sleeping bag liner was quite high up on the list. Next on the list is 15 power binoculars. So I got the Meopta Meostar 15 by 56 HDs, and these things saw a lot of glassing time. I didn't really use my 10s that often because I was too busy using these. We had these set up on the tripod nearly the whole time at camp, and I was very, very glad I'd purchased them before heading over because they saw a lot of use. So optics are pretty big on the list for me, and that was why on the wish list I had the spotting scope, because the 15s were great locating animals, but the spotting scope, just gave you that extra zoom just to work out whether you wanted to chase the tahr or not. Right, tripod, cameras on the tripod, so I'm not going to show you that. It's a different tripod obviously because I lost the one that I was using. But for the start of the trip, I was glad I had a tripod. Also, we were using some small glassing tripods. Tripods are awesome. They're just amazing, even on a 10 power binocular. Once you put your binoculars on a tripod, how much more you can see when you're not shaking around holding your binoculars. So tripod, very high on the list as well. All right, next up, wet weather jacket. 3 of us were running Swazis. John and Zach were using the Wapiti coat. I was using the Tahr Anorak. It's pretty dirty because it's been in the car, but these things were absolutely brilliant. Alana was using a Cryptek, can't remember the model, similar sort of deal. Water, windproof, has a hood, but those jackets, we nearly lived in them, especially while glassing, because the wind chill was pretty brutal. If you were sitting there glassing at camp and there was some slight bit of wind, and once that sun went down behind the mountain, you could still see, but the sun was gone. You started to lose all that body warmth. So having something like that to keep you warm and dry. I never got wet once in the Swazi, so not that there was really any rain, but there was a little bit, but not much. But even if it had been torrential, I still think it would have been dry in that thing. It's pretty much like a bomb shelter. So that was high up on the list. Now, I never thought I would ever buy a pair of these, but these things were brilliant. So they're Crocs, and I was in BCF before we left, looking at them, thinking about how horrible they looked, and all I could have in my ears was just all my mates saying, get some Crocs before you go to New Zealand, and they were right, they were awesome. So we lived in Crocs at camp, all four of us. We all had Crocs on at camp, and they made the rocky sort of stuff we were camping on around camp, they just made that heaven for your feet. You got back with wet boots, you took your boots off, put some dry socks on, put your Crocs on, and it was very comfortable. So very glad I bought some Crocs, even though I thought I looked like a bit of a pansy wearing them. Next up, Jetboil. So Alana has a Mighty Mo, Mini Mo, one of the two. Can't find it, I was going to bring it out shows, but that was a definite glad I had there. Wasn't a must. A lot of the time I just had cold sort of oats or porridge, ate a lot of my food cold, but when John invented the Crunchachino, I was pretty glad to have the Jetboils so we could make Crunchachinos. That was using hot chocolate sachets and putting crunchies in there and condensed milk. It was bloody delicious. So Jetboil, pretty high up on the list. Next up, battery packs. These saw a fair bit of use. This is the Dark Energy Poisoned, I don't know how to pronounce it. Used that quite a lot. Also had a cheaper, heavier eBay one. So the Dark Energy I sometimes threw in my backpack just because it's light, and that kept my phone charged. And it can also charge the big camera too, which is really handy. So battery packs were very good. All right, merino socks and thermals, so base layers. I just picked these up off eBay, both merino, they're like $30 or something, ridiculously cheap, but basically lived in them, made from Australian wool. They're not made in Australia unfortunately, but I'm kind of waiting for Tusk to release their base layers, the zip on zip off ones, because I think they're going to be awesome. So I didn't want to lash out too much money just yet. I'll wait for them. Good thing about merino though is stays warm when it's wet. I also had Polypro, and I typically hunted in the merino and I slept in the Polypro. There was no real science behind that. I just figured that if I was sweating a little bit in the merino, I would still stay warmer than in the Polypro. And the Polypro were a tighter fit, the ones I got, and they just felt better to sleep in for me. So that was why I did it that way. The Polypro also dry really quickly too, so that's something to keep in mind. Alright, what else have we got? I'm sort of losing where I'm at. Merino beanie. So before I left, well actually it was while I was in New Zealand, bought this beanie. It's an icebreaker merino beanie. This thing was awesome. I think I spent like $60 or something horrendous on it, but it was very, very good, and I'm glad I had it. Kept me nice and warm, even when it got wet, still kept me warm. And on the out of extremities, definitely something you want to keep in mind. Same with socks. I had merino socks on every day while I was hunting. And, so you're walking through a river straight away, they're thick merino. Walk through a river and your feet didn't get too cold throughout the day, especially if you were moving. If you stop, they start to get a little bit cold, but a lot warmer than they would have been with something synthetic. So big plus on the merino socks and beanie. Tusk gear. So I was using the Tusk gear to do a lot of my layering. The Boulder jacket, funnily enough, was probably one of my favourite items in New Zealand, mainly because of the big vent here that you can dump at your armpits. So you can just dump a heap of hot air out of there if you're starting to get hot when you're climbing up. And it's water and wind resistant, so it was just a nice warm layer to have. Gloves, where are they? I don't even know, there they are right in front of me. I normally don't wear gloves over in New Zealand though. These are just some Spiker, I don't know, hunting gloves, I'm not sure. Got them from H&S before I left. They were awesome. Kept my hands nice and warm when I was glassing. I've got the touchscreen thing for your phone. They look a little bit silly, but they were really good. They also, the Spaniard grass and stuff over there is brutally sharp, so wearing gloves you could really grab onto some of the undergrowth and maneuver your way down or up a cliff face without busting your hands open too much. So I was definitely glad to have the gloves. Right, salt. I'm not going to show salt, but I think we took 4 kilos of salt each, 2 kilos of salt each, something like that. and that was basically in preparation of shooting something so we could salt the capes. The beauty of getting flown in by the helicopter, we could take some extra salt. We could salt the capes nearly every day with a kilo of salt, so that was definitely on the glad I had list. Ready to eat snacks, haven't got them here, but things like muesli bars, jerky, stuff that you didn't need to cook, stuff that you could take with your hunting, didn't need to carry a jet ball or anything. I would never bother to do that. That's way too much weight and stuffing around for me. So having even scroggin, stuff like that where you can just eat it on the go without any preparation, that was high up on my list. Right, where am I? Dry bags. So we got a whole pack full of dry bags in there from Alana's old man. Thank you for them. And they were awesome. We put all our food, any gear that we didn't want to get wet, basically heaps of stuff into the dry bags. You could leave it outside the tent, you could chuck it sort of on the outer edge of the vestibule, and it didn't matter if it rained or if there was wind or whatever. The stuff in there stayed dry. They're the Cedar Summit bags, and it was good to go. All my clothing and important items were all in dry bags, and they just made life a lot easier. Even when we were loading up the helicopter, having stuff in dry bags, you could just chuck it in and you knew it was going to be safe and sound. Lots of layer options. So I've sort of already covered that with the Polypro and the Merino, but if you're going to head over to New Zealand, make sure you've got a lot of layer options. So I think I had 3 or 4 pairs of base layers, just basically a pair to keep at the tent. So when I got back from hunting, I could get into nice, clean, warm base layers, and a pair for hunting. And then I had a sort of backup pair in case a pair got wet and I needed an extra dry time day or whatever. There's a cat here that we're looking after. It's making a heap of noise. Excuse that. Puffy jacket. Bought this over in New Zealand, and I basically lived in it. The thing was awesome. So it's a North Face thermoball puffy jacket. Weighs basically nothing. It's quite a thin puffy jacket, but kept me super warm. I basically lived in it, I slept in it, and that's why I wish I bought a second one, because then I could have used the other one as a pillow. But if you're heading over there, puffy jacket should be high up on your list. Phone for photos. Basically when I lost the tripod, I wasn't carrying the big camera, so I was just carrying my phone around. This is the S7 by Samsung. Takes pretty decent photos and footage, and I was just using it, and definitely glad I had it. And that's why I was happy to have battery packs to keep it charged so I could take photos and videos, and I wasn't having to lug around big camera and tripod. Lucy lantern. I've mentioned this in quite a few videos before, but this thing was great. We literally just sat it up on top of the tent throughout the day, and then at night hang it up and you've got a light. So there's no batteries, just solar powered. That was really good for, when you're sitting back in the tent after your hunt and you've got some light and you can cook and eat and then sleep and turn off the lantern. All good. Food organised into daily bags. So we basically just bought some, the sandwich bags, those seal, I can't even remember what they're called. The bags with the seal on them. We had a big box of them, and we just organised our food into days, and that gave us a really good visual of what we could eat per day, and whatever we didn't eat, we just carried over into the next day. And in the end, we had a huge stockpile of food, which we just donated to charity. So that was really good, having just the food organised like that. That way you weren't over or under eating. You had a bag per day. Most people do that, sort of old news, but someone new might find that helpful. Sunglasses, which I do have here somewhere. These are just some electric sunnies that I bought years ago. I took them because I wasn't afraid to get them bashed up, and they did get bashed up, but I was super glad to have them, especially on the first couple of days when there was a lot of snow on the ground. The glare was unbelievable, like you were squinting without sunnies on. So glad I had sunnies on the days where there was a lot of snow. And even the other days, some of those cliff faces, there's a lot of glare coming off them from the sun, so glad I had sunglasses. Last on the list, last I've got here, is baby wipes, and main reason they're on the list was so you felt like you had some form of hygiene after you did what you needed to do. So if you're heading over there on an extended hunt, I'd highly recommend taking baby wipes just to clean yourself up. Other than that, I think that's about it. So if you have any questions or any queries, let me know. I don't think there's really anything else to add to this video, and hopefully someone's learned something from it. Oh, before I run away though, I also, the marsupial gear, bino harness and Swaros, one feature that I will just go through. What I was doing, so basically the 15s was in my pack, and if I wanted to get out and glass and set them up, it took quite a while. If I wanted to do a quick glass, you could just hold your Swaros up like this, which I did a bit, but I was using my walking stick, my trekking pole, as a monopod. So I'd sort of find somewhere steady, put this, rest the binoculars on top, and that was amazing how many tahr I saw just by doing that, just by providing some stability with the trekking pole. So that was another use for the trekking pole that I forgot to mention earlier. Anyway, I think that's about it, guys. Hopefully you've learned something, and yeah, if you have any messages, hit me up. Cheers.